Good afternoon. So this is probably the worst time that somebody can present because everybody has already had lunch. They got their food coma going on. It's been a long day. So if you fall asleep, I won't be offended. They're videotaping. You can go back and watch it. So, and then also, this is not a technical talk. This is not going to be some great way that you're going to be able to configure your firewall so that way you'll be able to wash your clothes from work. This is going to be very much more of a business-oriented talk. And so if you're technical and you like tech and you don't want to, I'm not offended if you get up and you leave. That's fine. So developing risk management, it's we have a really hard job as IT people, as security people, because we have this objective we're trying to meet in securing data, and we have people in the business who have their objective, which is to get business done, and sometimes they really don't blend very well. And so, who wins? If the boss comes in and says, this guy needs to have the keys to the data center, what do you say? Well, yeah, you would say no. I actually had a boss who insisted that this guy who had nothing to do with IT had keys to the data center, and there was nothing I could do to get him to change his mind. Okay, well, it's his business, it's his company, so there's an element of risk that he was willing to accept and giving this other guy the keys to the data center. And so sometimes we're not going to be able to win the battle. And so it's about learning how to pick and choose our battles and which ones are most important, and being able to educate those that don't do what we do. Okay, we know everything that happens. Or that can happen, and we read all of the blogs, and we read all of the news, and we get all of the information about all of the bad things that happen if you give the guys the keys to the kingdom. But, unless it's your company, you really don't have a say. And so it's all about balancing and managing that risk. One of the difficulties that we have, those that are making the decisions oftentimes don't really make educated decisions. They're just making decisions based on what they think is going to be best for the profits or the bottom line or getting their mission done. And unfortunately, we have to combat. There's been plenty of talks this week of what it's like in Hollywood, and we just saw a fun video on that, and we have to combat that. But ultimately, it's about educating those who are the decision makers and empowering them with information that's based on standards so that way they can make a decision. Okay? And so that's what we're going to be talking about today. Okay, how I became a speaker here. It's actually kind of funny because they did a study, and for people, the number one fear that most people have is public speaking. Number two is actually death, fear of death, and number three is the fear of falling. And so, we had this great trifecta here that I'm up here, public speaking, and I can fall off and die. And so I've got all three going on for me today. So how did I become a speaker? So this is my second SAINTCON. I've actually been in Utah now for about 4 years. And this is my second one. And when I came here last year, what a great opportunity to come here. And there's really a lot of tech and there's things that I haven't done for a long time. But where's the business side of it? Where's the cybersecurity management and the business management and the legal side? And I didn't see a lot. And so when they said, hey, tell us what you think about SAINTCON, I responded and I said, it was all techie. And where's the business side? And I was taught that if you have a complaint, don't just come with problems and complaints, come with solutions. And so when they said, hey, we're looking for speakers, I thought, well, okay, I complained last year, so maybe I'll put in and say, you need to do something. And they said, hey, great, come and talk. And so here I am. Did everybody see that picture that was there? Everybody remember it? Does anybody know who that was? It was Sun Tzu. Anybody know who that is? Art of War, right. Okay. So he said in the Art of War, if you know the enemy and you know yourself, you need not fear the results of 100 battles. And if you know yourself but not the enemy, for every victory you gained, you will also suffer a defeat. And if you know neither your enemy nor yourself, you will succumb to every battle. And so I bring this up because we spent a lot of really good time, and there's brilliant people here that are speaking in presentations, and they talk about ways that the attacker is coming in and attacking systems. And so we learn about knowing our enemy and what they do, and it's important for us to know all of the tactics that the attackers have, so that way we can know our enemy. But sometimes we don't put the same kind of effort in knowing ourselves. And so we want to be able to know exactly what we're looking at, okay? Earlier today, Jupiter, Troy, he gave a talk. Was anybody in that talk? Okay, so what did he say? If you're going to focus on anything, what should you focus on? The top 5, okay? You know, what are the top 5? Number 1 is you got to know what's on your network, okay? You got to know what's on your network. Number 2 is you got to know what's on your network. Okay, one's hardware, one's software. You got to know what's there. Okay, 3 is baseline configurations. Okay, you got to know how your systems are set up. Okay, what's number 4? I'm sorry, what was that? Yes, vulnerability scans, scanning for vulnerabilities. And what does that help you to do? Mediation, but more general. It helps you to know your network. Okay? So your first 4 is to help you know yourself. You've got to know what's on your network. You've got to know how your network is set up. Rob Joyce. Anybody know who Rob Joyce is? Rob Joyce, he's now the cybersecurity advisor in the White House. He was the guy who led the nation-state intelligence gathering with the NSA. He gave a talk and he said, the one who knows the network the best is the one who's going to win. Okay? And so you have to know your network. Okay? And so that's what, in the Art of War, that's what he's talking about. Okay? So, a little bit about myself. So I've got more than 16 years in the industry. I work now for the state of Utah in the Department of Technology Services. I'm part of the Enterprise Information Security team. We, meaning my family, my wife and my kids and I, we moved from San Diego to here about 4 years ago. Love Utah, very happy to be here. A lot of people say, why'd you move from San Diego? It's San Diego. And I said, it's not California. And there's a lot of problems that are happening in California, and it was hard to find work. It was hard to live. There's some things that are happening there. And now I'm just kind of happy because the whole state's burning down. And, and it's, so, okay. I have on the slide, oh, we got that up. Let me see if I can pull this back up now. Okay, so little known fact. I got a bunch of little stars there. So what do you guys want to know? A little known fact about me. Something about wildfires or something about royalty? Which one do you want to know? Wildfires. Okay, so when I was 16, I was on the front lines fighting wildfires. And at age 17, I was actually a fire marshal. And, well, now I was in the Boy Scouts and was at a Boy Scout camp. But I grew up in the Sierra Nevadas and in the forest and everything. I mean, fires were just a part of life, right? You know, what's a part of life in Utah? Snow. You know, so if you don't want snow, don't live in Utah. I mean, that's just what it is. You know, in Southern California, it's earthquakes. If you live in Florida, it's hurricanes. If you live in California, it's fires. And so it's just a part of life. I mean, it's something that we always did. And so, you know, when I was growing up and working in wildfires, there's certain processes that you had to follow in order to, number one, stay alive when you're on the fire lines. And number two, you know, help to make sure that things are protected. And, you know, strangely enough, it was because of the Boy Scouts that our camp didn't burn down. But I mean, right now, I mean, I really feel sorry for the people that live in Napa and that whole region. I mean, because at least when I was listening to radio this morning, 0% contained, 170,000 acres burned. I don't know how many hundreds of buildings are down and 0% contained. And the weather's kicking up that they're going to get wind. So, okay, so here I am married, been married for, it's going to be 18 years. And I've got 6 kids and an angel, but love being here in Utah. Okay, now my little description, I said we're going to be able to do this on a shoestring budget. Okay, so that's this part here. So when I was working down in San Diego, I had a boss who was very money conscious. And I joke around and I say that he was so miserly that he made Scrooge look like he spent like a drunken sailor. He told me that I needed to open up an office in Mexico, set up for 20 people, all the technology, budget was $12,000. Did it, okay? We got it done. But you know, sometimes you're just in a position, you just don't have the money, you know. Melanie Ensign, she talked in the other day about IT. What are we? Security especially, what are we? We're just a great big cost center, right? And so, you know, the bosses are like, we just don't have the money for you. I know that that's important, wink, wink. We don't have the money. And so oftentimes you have to go and find solutions that are either cheap or free, okay? And so that's what we have here. We have free. NIST. I'm going to talk about this for a couple of reasons. Number one, I work for the states, I work for the government, and so therefore I work with NIST. But another reason is it's free. It's all on the website. Now, this is not the type of documentation that you want to take into the boss because it is very technical. It's great for this audience, but it's not for the business person. But if you go to NIST, but you can see there, lots of publications to help you and give you guidance, lots of pages. The last one there, the cybersecurity framework. What's great about that is that NIST came out, and this was actually a directive that was given by Barack Obama, but they came out and created the cybersecurity framework, which is a lot more business friendly, okay? And so, and the cybersecurity framework is mapped to the actual NIST controls and others like COBIT and ISO and I'm sorry, there's another one in there. I can't remember what it is. But so it is mapped to a lot of those different standards. And so pick one, use it. You know, the best standard out there is the one that you're actually using. You know, just do something. But the cybersecurity framework is great because number one, it's free. And number two, it's written to be more business friendly. And number three, it'll actually get you going and being able to be effective in working with your business. Okay, in the news. Everybody knows about Equifax, but you can see right there, 4 cybersecurity companies went in and said that, poor security is what led to this, okay, in advance. It's not like, oh, hey, we didn't know, and then all of a sudden, boom, something happened. And no, they had a habit of not doing very good security. Okay, here's another one. This is Deloitte, big name in cybersecurity. Deloitte got hacked with their emails. People know about that. But look at that. Oops. Two-factor authentication wasn't used for the administrator of the email system. Okay, that got compromised, and here we go. Here's something positive, though. Securities and Exchange Commission. Okay, they actually came back and said, we are doing assessments, we are actually engaging, we are doing risk priorities, and we're taking care of these things. Anybody know about the breach that happened with SEC in August of 2016? Anybody see, read, hear that? Do you know why you probably didn't? Because it was on a test system and no PII got taken. Okay, but there was enough in that where the attackers were able to use that information, and I mean, this is Securities and Exchange, and so they were able to profit knowing about the way certain things in certain markets were working. But it wasn't the big, 145.5 million people, or the Targets or the Home Depots, or the breach mall that we saw here just about an hour ago. But the Securities Exchange, they're actually taking these results that they have. There was an audit that was done by OIG. That's the Office of Inspector General in the federal government. And they came in and said, hey, here are your deficiencies. Here is a organization that is taking NIST and is taking the framework and is actually applying all of these. And they have come out with their report on the things that they have happening and what they're doing to mitigate those, and so they're taking it from the top down. So that's great news. Okay, security versus compliance. Security does not equal compliance, and compliance does not equal security, right? We know this. Anybody know Trust Wave Holding? Anybody know who that company is? Chicago-based company. Okay, they were the consultant company, the third-party vendor that Target was using when Target had their breach. And TrustWave, they weren't doing their job. Okay, the point in this is that these are basic, simple things that smart people, tech people should know about, but aren't actually doing anything about them. No two-factor authentication on administration, not patching, not having poor cyber defense and cyber hygiene. Okay, security is about keeping the bad stuff from happening, and compliance is about checking the box, right? Okay, Pope was up here and he was talking about that. Oh, we got to check the box, we got to do the training. Okay, Target was compliant, right? Okay. Not secure. But security and compliance, they do go hand in hand. When you bring those two things together, it really helps to develop maturity. Okay, so data security lifecycle. Okay, all this information that I'm giving you is actually pulled out of NIST. The main document is NIST 800-37. Okay, NIST special publication 800-37. I do have a little bit of changes, and I'll tell you how I changed them and why I did. But step one in the life cycle is data classification. Okay, the presentation that I made available to to SAINTCON for you to be able to download is stripping out some of the extra things and making it more like presentation and more straightforward, because I want you to be able to take this back and show it to people and be able to kind of follow the circle as we go around this. So that way, okay, what do I do first? And this works really well because I have one of the organizations that I work with, I did this with them, and it came out really well. So data classification. Is this high, medium, low? Is it public? Is it restricted? However your organization classifies it, and getting those three different categories, you need to do it. You need to do it on every data set out there. You need to find your data sets and you need to do it. Electronic data sets and non-electronic data sets. I don't care if it's a server, a piece of paper, microfiche, VHS tapes, photos, whatever it is, you have to identify what data you have and you have to classify that data. Okay, the next one is you have to develop some type of security plan. What are we going to do to secure this data? Implement it. Actually put it into place. Get some type of plan of action and actually do it. Okay, so in NIST 837, let me actually get here. Okay, so those two bottom ones, we have one is a security assessment, one is a risk assessment. In 837, they actually just say assessment. Okay, they put those, I break those two out, and we'll actually get to that and why I break those two out. But so we implement our controls, and then we assess them. We do our security assessments. How effective is that implementation? And we go through that cycle until we think that we're good, or we've gone as far as we can go. And then we come in and we do the risk assessment. We couldn't get 100%, but we got 92%. Here's the 8%. This is why we can't do anything about it. Our risk of this 8% is such and such, and we talk to the business. Here's our risk acceptance. Here's our risk tolerance. Do we actually authorize this system to go into play? Okay. This is where it gets really difficult. Because when you're talking to the business person and you say, do you authorize this system to go into production? 99 times out of 100, they're going to say yes, because they have a mission that they want to fulfill, right? We need to be able to bring to them, when they say yes, at least they're saying yes, knowing all of the potential problems, okay? Chances are they're still going to say yes, but we want them to sign off on it, not us, okay? And then measure and assess. We have it up. We continue to do all of the efforts to continually protect that information. The cybersecurity changes how often? It's already changed since I asked the question, okay? It changes all the time. Okay, so there you have, okay, data classification. That's the first thing we're going to talk about. I like these little one-frame comics. Okay, classification. You got to do classification right, okay? If you just kind of pick something, you know, how do you know how to apply what controls where? So you got to classify things right, okay? When we talk about data classification, everybody here should know about the CIA triad, right? Okay? And we all know that we look at all three of those at equal parts, right? Okay? Integrity is just as important as confidentiality. What does the decision maker know? Confidentiality. Because what do they hear about in the news? Equifax, Target, personal identifiable information. All of that got leaked. How many people knew about the SEC breach in 2016? Not very many, because it didn't really deal with the confidentiality of people's information. And so it just doesn't get it. If it bleeds, it leads. Well, it didn't bleed, and so nobody knew about it. I'm not going to really read all of this, but you can see there in the bottom right, actually NIST publication 818 is all about data classification, and then you have FIPS 199 and categorization, okay? Those two documents will actually step you through, go through all the definitions. What does a high really mean? What does a low really mean, okay? All three of these are important. Any one of these, if you have a critical failure, can cause problems, okay? And so because of that, we always classify to the highest. Meaning, so if you look at confidentiality and you classify that as low, you know, this is a website. We want to get this information out. but the integrity of that information is high. This is a website that we want to make public. It's an emergency notification website, okay? That's really important that that information is correct. I was reading an article, and I was trying so hard to find it so that way I could reference it. But it was an article about a chemical plant in Louisiana that blew up. And this was, this chemical plant was, it was like 60% of the small town population was employed by this chemical plant. And there were pictures and Twitter, and it made regional news, and photos of this chemical plant on fire, and people calling them, did I lose my job? What are we doing? And it didn't happen. The plant was okay. Okay, this was perpetrated by a Russian group using social media to see what type of reaction would be able to come out of misinformation. Okay, so integrity high. So we have confidentiality low, integrity is high. We always classify to the most restrictive, so that's high. Regulated data. I know, with the state and with government, we deal with a lot of regulated data. There's a lot of people that work in the private sector. If you do, maybe you might want to consider having just a fourth classification, just so that way you can distinguish between that data set that is governed by specific rules or laws. If you're in healthcare, you have HIPAA, you've got FERPA, you've got banking regulations and so forth. But just to kind of point that out. Okay, so security plan. Yeah, absolutely. I'd be happy to read that. So sit around the table. What if we don't change at all and something magical just happens? Okay. You notice on the wall, for those in the back, it says profits, and what is the line doing? It's going down. Okay. So something magical has happened. We're not going to do things. If you fail to plan, it's an automatic plan to fail. Yes, automatic plan to fail. So we've got to have some type of plan. Okay, so our plan, which security controls are going to be implemented? How many controls are there? Way more than we're probably ever going to be able to deal with, right? Okay, we even have privacy controls. If you look in NIST 853, it's got a huge list, 260 plus security controls that can be implemented over 1,000 different ways. And actually down at the bottom in an appendix is a whole other set of privacy controls. Okay, lots that we can do. Which ones are we going to do? Okay, that's what our plan is about, trying to figure out which controls are. Troy, what did he say? Which one should we do? Number one is what? What's that? Hardware. Hardware. We got to have to. We need to know what's on our network. Inventory of hardware. Whole set of controls that deal just with the inventory of hardware. Okay. So what controls are we going to implement? Let's implement the most important ones first. Okay. How are we going to implement those controls? Every organization is different, smaller, larger, regulated, non-regulated. How do we implement those controls? That needs to be in your security plan. Who is going to implement those controls? Pope was talking about there are technical controls and there's management control. This particular control, who's going to be responsible for it? And then is this a common security control, or is this going to be a system-specific security control? And then the last one is there any scoping guidance? If you are, say, in a doctor's office, you've got HIPAA and HIPAA high tech that you have to deal with. There's some guidance that can help you to figure out which controls you're going to use, and also to help you to become compliant. Okay. So, here's just a diagram. You got all of this information, your requirements, your POEM, your assessments, all of that feeds in and should inform your security plan. And then your security plan then will inform any future audits and assessments, and will also inform the future authorization of whether or not that system should or should not come into play. Okay? All right. We have our plan. It's documented. Everybody knows about it. Now we actually have to implement that plan. POAM is what? That's right, plan of action and milestones. Okay? We are implementing new security standards in the office. So don't forget to use the ECRIT ODK. Okay, so now a POAM differs from a security plan. Okay, the plan documents what the expectations are. The POAM documents how those expectations are going to be met. Okay? And it should include a good quality task description. Okay? Use a lot of information. Let's make sure everybody's clear on what that description is. What are we trying to accomplish? Some method of tracking progress to the implementation of that. Identification of who is responsible for it. And when do we expect for it to be done? Okay. Sometimes things go over for one reason or another. You can track expected due date and actual due date. You know, sometimes we have a really good team and we have a healthy amount of resources and we get things done before time and under budget. But some type of completion. Because if you don't give somebody a due date, what happens? Yeah, people just put it off and they'll put it off. It won't get done. So, but we also want to make sure that all of these things, there's a lot that needs to be done. We need to prioritize these things. Okay, these tasks, which are most important. This implementation, this POAM, you know, there may be something else that the boss wants to see. They want certain metrics. They may want some other information. Whatever they want to see, obviously, we'll get that in there into the POAM so that way we can track it properly. Okay, talking about our assessments. Okay, our security assessment, it'll go around and around until we're happy with it, and then we'll move on to a risk assessment. I like one frame comics, but Dilbert kind of takes the cake. So can everybody see that okay? I'll take that as a yes. What if I just made up numbers? Who would know? Right? I can do whatever I want. Yeah, of course I got those security controls in place. You know, yes, Target, CEO, it's all looking great. Look, PCI came in and they said we're good too. You know, we got to assess, okay? So security versus risk assessments, a little bit different. Security assessment, we want to know. We've just taken the effort to put controls in. How effective are the controls? So that's what we are assessing. Is it good or is it bad? Did we get 100%? Did we get 92%? Did we get 27%? Security, that's all we're looking for in a security assessment. Here's the control, assess it. A risk assessment says, okay, we have that 8% that didn't get done. Okay, what's the impact? If that 8% were to be exploited, what would the impact be? Do we have any compensating controls in place? Okay, so security assessment, is the control working, yes or no? Risk assessment is, well, if it doesn't work, what's the impact? Okay? Security assessment is a prerequisite to the risk assessment. How do you know the risk if you don't know if things have been done right? Remember that, Dilbert? Yeah, of course, don't worry about it. You have to know if it's actually been implemented properly. And then you can do a comprehensive risk assessment. And then in addition to the security assessment, Risk assessments will also pull in other factors that may not even be cyber. They could be human resource factors. They could be, what was the profits of the last quarter? Do we have money to be able to fund a further development? What's the market look like? So there's a whole lot of other things that come into an overall risk assessment that our security assessment really isn't touching, okay? A little bit redundant here in what I just said, but graphics are really good for non-technical people, okay? Control 1 is in place, Control 3 is in place, Control 2 is not in place. They can see that, and then they can ask questions, and you can have a discussion about Control 2. Do we need to discuss Controls 1 and 3? No, not really. They're good. We've tested them, okay? Everybody knows about the traffic light, green, yellow, and red, right? Okay. So this is a really good way to display your results of your assessments when you're talking to people, so that way they can get information very quickly. Okay. Security assessments are typically done by analysts, middle manager, that kind of level, and risk assessments are done at a higher level, vice president, executive management. If you're a large organization, publicly traded, it could be the board of directors. Those are the ones that are determining the risk and whether or not they're willing to accept that risk. Okay, we move those risk assessments into authorization. And I kind of box those together because it's a risk assessment that you need to include the person who's authorizing the system to go into place in your risk assessment process, because they're the ones that are going to be putting their name down on the paper saying, yes, I like this, roll it into production, okay? Yeah, ship with a P, right? Okay, so who is responsible for authorizing a system to go into production? What's that? It depends. On what? Organizational structure. If you've got a small company that's got 5 employees, typically it's just one person, right? But if you've got a large organization and you've got multiple divisions and you've got multiple functional areas within divisions, you can have any one of a number of people who is going to be authorizing that system into play, right? But we need to make sure that that person is identified and that they know what their role and responsibility is, and they also understand the risks of actually being the authorizing agent. Okay? We need to educate them. When you say yes, your yes means this. But typically, it's some type of senior official. It is somebody who can formally assume responsibility for when things go south. Okay? The guy in the cubicle sitting next to you, unless he's a senior official, is not the guy who should say, yeah, run it. Okay? Authorizing officials are accountable for security risks. Okay? One of the things that really just burns me is the CEO of Equifax. What did he say when he was testifying for Congress? Yeah, it was his fault. He didn't do the patch. Okay? Well, remember those 4 companies? They all said, no, it's your fault because you had a bad program. You had a bad security program. Your security hygiene was pretty stinky. Okay? So make sure whoever it is that is accountable for that system, make sure they understand what that really means, okay? So in order for them to be effectively authorizing systems, they need to have information. And so you should therefore give them your security plan. This is what we were going to do. Give them your assessments. We've implemented, and this is what happened. And here's our POAM that tells us how we got to our answers and how long it took and so forth. You have now given them all of the documentation they need to be able to start reaching out to other people. If it's a larger organization, there could be a risk management division. They can reach out to them. There has to be, that information is going to help them to be able to say, yes, I approve this system, or no, I do not. Okay? Excuse me. Your decision document really needs to contain those 4 things. Okay? This needs to be a documented process. Sometimes you're just going to get those people who, my email is good enough. Okay, fine. Take the email and save it. Don't put it in the delete box, okay? Because that's your card to say, you told me that it was okay to put this into play. Okay? Risk versus benefit. It's a balancing act. It's a very thin line that we weave on whether or not a system should be in production or not. Sometimes we got to get it into production, because if this system goes down, we're out of business. So I was the IT director for a law firm in San Diego. We had 5 states that we were in, and then that was the Mexico office. And so we were an international company, and very highly sensitive information. We were debt recovery. And I went to the boss and I said, it was a Friday, and I said, I need you to think of something over the weekend, and let's get together on Monday and let's discuss this. And I asked him, I said, how much downtime is an acceptable amount of downtime? Because, we're in IT, right? Things fall apart, and so things go down. But so what is the acceptable amount of downtime? His answer was immediate, and he said what? I bet you can answer. 0. That's right, 0. I said, okay, not a problem. We can do that, right? We have the technology. And that's what I told him. I said, in order for us to meet 0, we need to have redundant everything. So all of the hundreds of thousands of dollars that we spent just to set up what we have, we need to do that again. Oh, and by the way, it can't be here in this office. It's got to be in a geographically different location, which means, oh, by the way, we have to have the bandwidth to be able to push all that data real time, right? And he said, that's ridiculous. And I said, so is your requirement of 0 downtime. You have to decide. You have to weigh the benefit versus the risk. We actually were able to get together on Monday. We're able to have a little bit more of a discussion, and he came to a more reasonable expectation, which actually, what do we normally look for? How many 9s? 4, 5, whatever it is. When he actually came back, what do you think he told me at that point? It actually didn't even hit 9s. It was like 97% is what he was able to tolerate. Well, I was hitting 4 and 5 9s, so I'm like, okay, great, we're in good shape. Okay. So risk versus benefit. Okay, measure and assess. Continuous monitoring. Okay. Well, one of us is in the wrong cartoon. How did we get there? Okay, we had this production system up. Everything was working great. How did we get here? Okay, we have to be able to monitor on a regular basis. Effective continuous monitoring program includes defining a strategy. What do we want to measure? A really good choice would be what? What's number 4 in the top 5? Vulnerability management. That's a really good start, okay, on continuous management. Maybe another thing is to do regular assessments on the inflow and exit of devices within the organization, right? Getting the control over that inventory, cradle to grave. So what's our strategy? Next thing is establishing and implementing a continuous monitoring program. Okay, we have a strategy. How are we going to implement that strategy? Now we should be able to get some type of metrics back. And if you aren't getting metrics back, I'm going to say that you don't have a good program. You need to be able to know whether or not what you're monitoring is actually effective. Okay? And then you have to respond. What was one of the problems with Target? What did they do with that red blinking light? They ignored it. They put a paper over it. Man, that is so annoying. Let's put that paper over it so we don't have to look at it anymore. Okay? You got to respond when you find something. And then you review, you update your program and your strategy. You have to be willing to change and modify the way you do things because the security and the threat landscape that's out there changes constantly. What was good a month ago and what was good 2 months ago and what was good a year ago likely is not necessarily going to be good today. Okay? All right. So I wanted to take a few minutes. The presentation that I had put out for this for people to download, I put that out, and then I got notification that NIST updated and they're going into revision 2 of 837. Okay? It's currently in draft form. The expectation is that we'll go into final draft in March of 2018. So we got about 6 months. And this is an opportunity for anybody within the security community and risk management community to offer comments, recommendations, changes, things like that. So you can actually go out to NIST, go into draft publications, and you should be able to find this and you can read it. But I wanted to kind of highlight some of the differences, and so that way you're kind of aware that if you're going back and you're talking to your business people and the IT people and IT directors and whoever it is, that there's going to be a slight shift in the way things are recommended. Okay? So first one, in revision 1, we're saying that individuals on the front lines are important. In revision 2, we're saying individuals are important. Okay, there was this distinction, and I've heard it a couple of times throughout the conference, but this idea of the front line, the people on the front. And if you have that front line, what do you then have? What's that? Yeah, soft, chewy middle. But it says that there's a back line, right? Okay, and who, if you think about warfare, who's on the front lines? Fodder, right. And who's in the back? Your generals, your CEOs. Those are the ones that aren't in the day-to-day fray of things. But what do we know about cybersecurity? Who's responsible is cybersecurity? Whose responsibility? What's that? Yes, authorizing individuals. Who else? Everyone. Everybody in the organization has responsibility for cybersecurity. And so this distinction is saying everybody is important, not just those frontline people. Okay, revision 1 says risk management can be viewed as a holistic activity. Version 2 says risk management must be a holistic activity. I don't want to read the whole thing, but I do kind of want to point something out here. This whole phrase is important. You take a picture if you'd like, but right there at the beginning, conducted at levels 1 and 2. What does that mean? Levels 1 and 2. Level 1 is your executive management. That's your top level. That's your C management. That's your executive directors. Those are the ones that are making responsibilities for the organization. Okay. Level 2 is kind of your middle management. Those are the ones that are more mission specific. And then level 3 is, those are the ones that are actually, in the trenches doing the work, okay? R2, revision 2, is putting emphasis and focus. Levels 1 and 2 are just as important in risk management as that level 3, okay? And then the other thing that they did is they do still have the data security lifecycle, but they put that little block in the middle saying prepare. In all phases of your lifecycle, prepare. And what does prepare mean? Prepare is intended to emphasize the importance of having an organization-wide governance. Everybody has to be involved, and risk management is a top-down management, okay? That first level needs to set a strategy. This is what is important to the organization. That level 2 then comes in and says, okay, what are we going to do to meet that overall strategy? Create the plans, create the POAMs. Level 3 then gets in and down into the mud and actually implements it. And then it all, let me go back to here. You can see those areas. All 3 levels are informing all 3 levels. Okay? This isn't a line drawn. Everybody needs to be involved all the time together. Okay. I apologize, I'm 1 minute over. I got started 9 minutes, 10 minutes late, so I think I'm doing pretty good. Any questions? All right, well, thank you very much. I appreciate you sitting around. And that clapping is your cue to wake up.